The world's first registered COVID-19 vaccine, so says Russia this Saturday as it launches a nationwide immunisation campaign using Sputnik 5. Critics, though, say the vaccine hasn't been tested enough. For a third week in a row, thousands rally in France over a proposed security law which would restrict the right to film the police. President Macron, meanwhile, rejects claims that freedoms are being eroded under his rule. Also coming up in Ethiopia, conflicting reports emerge over the month-long war between government and Tigrayan forces. The UN, meanwhile, warns the humanitarian situation is dire. Hello and welcome. You're tuned into France 24. I'm Michelle Ferguson. We are here with the headlines for you this hour. First, Russia has kicked off a nationwide COVID-19 immunisation campaign this Saturday using Sputnik 5, which it says is the world's first registered COVID-19 vaccine. Well, thousands of doctors, teachers and others in high-risk groups have signed up to receive the jab. Russia's President Vladimir Putin saying earlier this week that more than 2 million doses would be made available in the next few days. Moscow, which currently accounts for about a quarter of daily coronavirus infections, has opened 70 vaccination facilities there. Have a listen.
Прекрасно. Абсолютно нет ощущения, что укол был, никаких напоминаний об этом нет. Не щипет, не болит, не тянет, ничего. Не горит, не онемело, ничего не произошло.
Ну, понятно, что были какие-то сомнения, особенно с учетом неполного клинического испытания, неоконченного. Но все-таки я решила себя обезопасить максимально возможными способами.
To talk more about Russia's Sputnik 5, Mohammed Munir is a lecturer in biomedicine at Lancaster University. Thanks very much for speaking to France 24. Russia then vaccinating people this Saturday. Trials of the vaccine, though, are still ongoing. Talk us through what this means. I mean, is this dangerous, Dr. Munir?
Yes, well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I think one of the reasons that we have been waiting for so long for a vaccine is to have it tested, rigorously tested, and to have a rubber stamp onto the efficacy and stability as well as the efficacy. Having an incomplete phase 3 trial, meaning that you don't have that data, and then mass deployment, going to pose a serious risk, not only just for the possible side effects that are not yet very well tested, but also really on a vaccine hesitancy, which is really a growing problem in Europe and many other countries. And for having a vaccine deployed in Russia, probably going to put the pressure onto other governments to really take action. That would be cutting the corner. So all in all, myself as a scientist, I will look into the original data, which has not yet been made available. So without having a data just through the press releases is really dubious and really need to look very carefully.
I mean, Dr. Munir, finding a vaccine has, of course, been primarily about health. There's also been this major competition about which laboratory is going to effectively release this vaccine effectively first. There will be those who say, well, why couldn't it simply be Russia first?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There is no doubt on that any country could lead to. And Russian research is not really anybody doubts. And I have a strong belief that they have already using the same technology, the adenovirus-based technology. They have proposed Ebola, a very successful vaccine. And that's what they've been claiming. They have repurposed that technology and used it for the SARS-2. Actually, the technology is not a problem and is proven. And it's basically the same technology as Oxford AstraZeneca is using, Johnson Johnson is using, and CanSino, the Chinese vaccine, are using. So technology-wise, it's all good. It's just the methodologies and the approach it is being used. For instance, approval of a vaccine soon after having Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, and then rolling out into the population as soon as UK has approved. These really put the question mark onto how the Russian itself wanted to drive this one, which is not really something that would be driven by the science, but driven by environment and what's going on into the rest of the world.
I'd like to talk a little bit about these vaccines when it comes long term. We had, a couple of days ago, the French president saying, look, we ultimately don't know everything that there is to know about these vaccines yet. It's still very new. Are there concerns, or should there be concerns, that, side effects could develop from any of these vaccines later down the line, Dr. Munir?
Yes, absolutely. Very important question. I think there are certainly concerns because we normally take 10 to 15 years to develop a vaccine, and now the vaccine being developed only in 1 year. Certainly, there are things that have been overlapped. But one thing I would like to highlight here is that the time that has been cut is not cut onto the number of people that have been assessed or the trial that has been conducted. That has already been done at the number that is required to have a really rubber stamp onto the efficacy and so on. But the thing that is really getting a bit of concerns is about the rushing into the approval processes, because I mean, we have waited for 10 months, really, and there is no harm to wait another 1 month and go into that data in a very, very fine-tuned, studied manner, either using artificial intelligence, bringing in the experience for cross-disciplinary regulatory bodies. For example, I don't really see the problem why the European Medicine Agency can't work with FDA and FDA can't work with MHRA here in the UK to work collaboratively, assess all those candidates who are at the front runner to really make sure that we are taking public in confidence.
Dr. Munir, we are running out of time. We'd like to speak with you more. A personal question. Will you be getting the vaccine once it's approved, or will you be waiting 15 years to see whether there are additional side effects?
Well, certainly, if it is approved by the FDA, by MHRA or European Medicine Agency, I would rest assured that it is all safe and good to move on into the human arms.
OK, Dr. Mohammed Munir, a lecturer in biomedicine at Lancaster University. Thanks for your time today. Well, now, for the third consecutive week, thousands of people are rallying across French cities over a proposed security law that would restrict the right to film police officers. There have been clashes here in Paris between protesters and police. Meanwhile, in Marseille, Rennes and Lille, demonstrators have also taken to the streets. Anger grew over the legislation, with images of police beating a black music producer emerging last month. On Friday, President Macron hit back at claims that freedoms are being eroded under his rule. He did, though, admit that police violence is a problem, announcing a new platform to report unnecessary police checks. France 24's Wassim Cornet has been following today's protest.
First of all, to explain where exactly we are, Porte des Lilas, where the march began, is right behind me, and to the opposite of me, behind the camera, lies about about a dozen police trucks. So the atmosphere is kind of tense this afternoon, so we've made the safe decision to stay well upstream of the demonstration. But yes, as you mentioned, more than 130,000 people marched across France last Saturday. This weekend, we've seen several hundreds of people start right there at the Porte des Lilas behind me. Several thousands more are expected. Again, major movements converging into one protest, really. But the main demand, as you mentioned, is that global security law, which has been seen as so inflammatory by so many people here in France. Article 24, which makes it a crime for people to publish pictures of footage, of police officers online or on TV with the intention of harming them. That would make it a crime to do so, and would make it punishable with up to 1 year in prison and 45,000 euro fine. We've had several rights groups saying that is really show that the Macron government is turning into a downward spiral into authoritarianism, and that would seriously curb freedom of speech and freedom of expression.
Well, with time to reach a post-Brexit trade deal running short, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the EU chief Ursula von der Leyen are to hold crunch talks this Saturday. This in a bid to break a deadlock, underlined once again on Friday night when Brexit negotiators Michel Barnier and David Frost said no trade deal would be met on Friday, owing to significant divergences. Well, the pressure's mounting to strike a deal with just weeks left until the 11th month Brexit transition period ends. That's on December the 31st. Well, staying with Brexit, one of those major sticking points over reaching a trade deal has been fishing. Boris Johnson and France's Emmanuel Macron remaining firm on their positions. Now, with the threat of losing access to British fisheries looming, French fishermen fear that Europe's fishing vessels could flock to French waters. France 24's Camille Nedlec explains.
It's a tough life that could be about to get even tougher. As the threat of a no-deal Brexit looms, these French fishermen could soon find themselves cut off from British fisheries.
Tout l'été, on passe notre vie chez les Anglais, nous. On pêche 80% du poisson l'été chez eux. Nous, l'été, ici, on n'a rien.
The fishermen are paid based on their catch. 40% of sales goes to them, 60% to the ship owner. If by the 1st of January there's no Brexit deal, they'll have to fish in French waters. That spells economic disaster.
On va être cantonné dans la partie sud de la Manche, quoi. Et on va se partager tout ça avec les Européens, quoi. Avec les Hollandais, avec les Belges. Ça va être une vraie catastrophe.
But for the UK, their plight is just a case of what goes around comes around. Britain's rich waters were overfished for decades. And as the size of the catch by British fishermen shrank, so did the industry. It's half the size it was in 1975. Fisheries have become a bitter political flashpoint, despite representing a tiny fraction of the British economy. The latest EU proposition to appease Westminster is to give the UK 18% of everything European fishermen catch, but that's been rejected by Britain. The stakes are also high for the UK, as 80% of its catch is exported, much of it to the EU. In the event of a no deal, those exports would be subject to tariffs.
Mali's interim legislature has elected Colonel Malik Diaw, a member of the ruling military junta that toppled President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta back in August as its president. The 121-seat body, known as the National Transitional Council, has been meeting in the capital, Bamako. Young army officers in the conflict-ridden Sahel state toppled Boubacar Keïta in August after weeks of anti-government protests. To Ethiopia next, where conflicting reports are emerging concerning the month-long war between government and Tigrayan forces. Federal forces then saying they've captured and killed most rebel commanders from the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Local Tigray leaders, though, say civilians are protesting against looting by occupying soldiers. The UN has meanwhile sounded the alarm over the thousands of people who've died in the conflict and 47,000 more who've crossed into neighbouring Sudan.
At this makeshift camp in Sudan, Ethiopian refugees who crossed the border fleeing the conflict in the Tigray region now wait for hours to get water. Barely 3 weeks old, this camp, meant to house 5,000, is now at double capacity. And with supplies running low, tempers are fraying.
Most of people, they are eating 1 meal per day. And also this one, shelter, blanket. They are not provided still now. We have a problem with it.
Across the border in Tigray, conflicting reports. Government forces claim they have captured or killed most commanders of the rebellious northern force.
We're only 10 kilometers away from the remaining rebel leaders. They're protected by armed commandos.
Speaking to France 24, Tigray's regional president said the fighting continues and claims that Eritrea was providing support to Ethiopia in the conflict.
They are part of this federal army. They are here with their divisions. Last time we have been said 16 divisions are already in Tigray. So they are fighting on the side of the federal army. For us, they are only the same. We have a united front, against us. So wherever you go, they are there.
With fighting ongoing, aid organizations have found difficulty accessing the area. According to the United Nations, over 47,000 people have fled across the border into neighboring Sudan, and over 3 million people are in need of aid.
Well, there you have it. You're up to date with all the latest world headlines. More news coming up shortly for you here on France 24. Join us then.